समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Earlier this week, the world watched as Communist Party of China chairman, China's President Xi Jinping, appeared face to face with American President Donald Trump. As usual, he appeared confident, put together, powerful in a single word. For the 2 weeks before this meeting, though, experts across the world were debating just what is driving Chairman Xi's renewed assault on corruption in the People's Liberation Army. After all, a confident leader shouldn't need to be sacking his officials every now and then. A record of 9 senior military officials were thrown out of office on 17th October, including several commanders and a member of the 24-man central decision-making body, the Politburo. The general explanation is that this is simply part of an ongoing anti-corruption crackdown, but there could be more. A state newspaper reported the officials had challenged, I quote, the system where the Central Military Commission chairman bears ultimate responsibility. In other words, a group of officers had done something to undermine Xi. The question is exactly what leads Xi and other communist leaders before him to brutally move aside any opposition. The answer, I'm going to argue, is that this might be a feature of authoritarian systems, not a glitch. Leaders need competent dynamic aides, but they also need to get rid of them before they become a threat. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of The Print Explorer. A special thank you to my regular viewers and listeners whose comments help me think through a great many things and for which I'm very grateful. In this episode, I'm going to try and understand the insecurities behind Xi's endless purges of his own top officials. 2 years from now, the People's Liberation Army will turn 100, and many think that's when it will exert military pressure on Taiwan and demonstrate a willingness to go to war across the Pacific to demonstrate its rise as a great power. Are these purges somehow linked to that end? To answer that question, I think you have to go back to the China Xi grew up in and what he lived through. Xi Jinping knows firsthand how inner party struggle can turn into entropy and take the country to the edge of disintegration. And he's convinced only a relentless concentration of power in his own person can prevent that outcome. Lined up outside the Huangmao food and supply store, an 8-food cauldron bubbled energetically as the mob waited to eat Zhang Bokshun, the son of a poor peasant family in Duhai. Guo had tried to escape the crowd of revolutionaries who cornered him in the summer of 1969 as the Cultural Revolution tore through China. But it was too late. He was dragged out of the river and his liver cut out while he was still alive. This prized organ was served in a separate casserole for purportedly medicinal purposes. Thousands died in the so-called Cultural Revolution of 1966-1977 as maddened young cadre of the Communist Party of China sought to extirpate counter-revolutionaries said to be embedded among their midst. Thousands were killed and some eaten in the province of Guangxi. I have stepped into a dark forest full of evil, the novelist Zheng Yi later recorded, and I have uncovered a scarlet memorial covered with human blood. The perpetrators continued to live alongside their victims, sometimes rising to positions of influence in the local Communist Party of China bureaucracy. I quote, an unmarried woman only 18 years old, Wang Wenliu became famous as a result of her bravado at the conclusion of struggle sessions, for reputedly she had a preference for cutting off male genitalia, which she cooked at home and shared with her sick mother. She won repeated promotions and soon served as deputy head of the Cultural Revolutionary Committee of the entire county. historian Donald Sutton has recorded. Like Saturn, the great Protestant thinker Malais Dupin had written as France rose against its aristocracy in 1789, the revolution devours its children. In Guangxi, the feeding was orgiastic and tore society apart. As plutonium bombs or even an egg in a microwave oven will demonstrate, implosion is a very, very powerful force. Xi Zhongxun, President Xi's father, had served the communist revolution from its genesis, fought with its soldiers, and was admitted to the party's all powerful Central Committee in 1956. In 1959, he became a vice premier, directing the State Council's lawmaking role and various core research roles. Like other so called princelings or children of high officials, she grew up in considerable luxury. The young Shi lived at a luxurious official home and studied at an elite school for the children of top party officials. From 1962, the expert Joseph Torrigian has recorded, things began to go horribly wrong over a book. The elder Shi defended a biography of the revolutionary hero Liu Shitan. According to the Chinese intelligence czar Kang Sheng, the book contained veiled anti-communist heresies. Shi Zhongsun, the father, was demoted and sent off to serve as deputy manager of a tractor factory in remote Luoyang. Qixin, his wife, was sentenced to hard labor on a farm. Early in 1967, the journalist Evan Osnos has written, the elder Shi was humiliated by Red Guards who seized power during the so-called Cultural Revolution, among other things being accused of having gazed longingly at West Berlin through binoculars. For years afterwards, Shi Zhongxun would recall, he was held in a military garrison, maintaining his sanity by walking in circles 10,000 laps one way and then 10,000 laps the other. Shi, the son, was sent off to work in the remote village of Liangxiahe in Shaanxi province from 1969 to 1973. Their accounts agree he encountered tremendous hardship and deprivation. Educated at the super elite August I school, which was run from a former imperial palace, Xi Jinping also had to unlearn his privileges. Though discipline at the school was tough, Torrigian writes that students were sometimes beaten and forced to eat old rice contaminated by rat feces. It was a premier educational institution. From 1966, though, the school's little princes were being confronted by Red Guards who proclaimed, if the father is a reactionary, the son is a bastard. So at the age of just 14, by one account, she was threatened with execution by Red Guards. There was an occasion when he was forced to wear a cone-shaped dunce cap and was then paraded at a public shaming rally. Things turned again, though. Following the end of the Mao Zedong era, the elder Xi was rehabilitated and returned to the Politburo in 1982, journalist Katsuji Nakazawa writes. The younger Xi went on to study at the prestigious Tsinghua University. After graduating in 1979, Xi secured a job in the Central Military Commission as the youngest of three personal secretaries for then Defense Minister Geng Biao. Likely, though, the brutal experiences of his adolescent years had a lasting psychological impact. She eventually became secretary of his village and after multiple attempts secured readmission to the party. He led efforts to build new roads and constructed a methane tank to supply residents with gas for cooking and lighting. But he was also making plans to return to university in Beijing, having seen other blackballed youth slowly drift back to the cities. Likely, Nakazawa suggests, she learned this lesson, and I quote, in a power struggle, if either side fails to make a preemptive attack, it will eventually be pinned in and handcuffed by the other side. Those on the losing side will be wiped from history, while the victor goes down as a great figure. Even Mao, despite his disastrous policies that resulted in tens of millions of deaths, is widely respected. Close quotes. To ward off chaos, it was essential to ensure the absolute authority of the party and the party leadership. Early in 2013, Xi gathered hundreds of top officials to hear a speech. He recalled the crumbling of the Iron Curtain more than 2 decades ago and warned that communist China could meet the same fate as the Soviet Union. I quote, Their ideology became confused, party groups at all levels became virtually ineffective, even the military was no longer under the party's leadership, he complained. In the end, a party as vast as the Soviet Communist Party scattered like birds and bees. She almost certainly knew that the real problem in the Soviet Union did not develop in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell. In 1923, Leon Trotsky, the triumphant leader of the Red Army, launched a trenchant attack on Joseph Stalin, claiming the strongman was running a regime of, I quote, professional secretaries. He argued that Stalin was not doing enough to encourage revolution in European countries like Germany, which was critical, in Trotsky's view, to the survival of the Soviet Union. Even worse, the historian J. Arch Getty has recorded, Trotsky accused the regime of losing contact with its working class constituency. The rival leaders of the party, Nikolai Bukharin, Grigory Zinoviev, and Lev Kamenev, worried Trotsky was emerging as a sort of Soviet version of Napoleon Bonaparte and hoping to seize power on the back of military success. Though internally divided, they allied with Stalin to force Trotsky into exile. This would lead to a ferocious series of assassinations, murders, and executions after show trials. True, Russians did not ritually consume the livers of their political enemies, but the terror unleashed by Stalin was no less lethal than anything that happened in the Maoist era. Forced labor camps or gulags became a key part of Stalin's project to discipline and reconstruct society, author Anne Applebaum writes. The projects Stalin had committed often were ill conceived. The Arctic Railway line, for example, was meant to connect nickel mines to a port near Igarka. That port could not be built because of the region's unsuitable marine geography. This meant the sacrifice of lives to build that railway route was completely pointless. Even though most prisoners at the camps were small time criminals, Stalin's Gulag also housed intellectuals and dissidents like the rocket scientist Valentin Glushko, the geneticist Nikolai Timofeev Resovsky, the composer Vsevolod Zaderatsky, the ballerina Nina Asimova, the writers Valan Shalamov and Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The Gulag survivor Yevgenia Ginsburg wrote, I quote, "In all that was happening in the country at that time, we were confronted with the monstrous and puzzling violation of human logic and the total absence of common sense." Late one afternoon in March 1953, the journalist Lev Razgon, held in Stalin's gulags from 1938 to 1942 and again from 1952, heard the sounds of heaven on the prison loudspeakers. There was, Razgon wrote, Bach, Handel, Beethoven, and then we heard the health assignment. "The bastard is finished," a prison doctor said. "No hope for him." And we began kissing one another. Inside months, Alexei Tikhonov records, 1.5 million people were released on the orders of Stalin's infamous intelligence chief, Lavrenti Beria, who would go on to himself be executed. The PLA itself had been battered by the sweeping revolutionary fervor that cloaked China in the Cultural Revolution. In 1965, it had seen all badges of rank abolished as part of an effort to make an egalitarian people's army. To leaders around Mao, though, it had become clear the country was falling apart, and the PLA was the only organization disciplined enough to contain the crazed ultra-violence of the Red Guards. The critical turning point came in the violent summer of 1967 when the radicals overplayed their hand and began a full-scale rebellion in Wuhan, scholar Ellis Joffre writes. Facing abuse in the official Maoist press and calls for the PLA's institutional structure to be dismantled, the generals struck back. Exactly what senior army commanders told the party leadership is still a little opaque, but on 5 September 1967, they were given unequivocal instructions to restore order and use force if necessary against the Red Guards. This was the beginning of the end of the so-called Cultural Revolution. The current unprecedented purge of 9 senior PLA officials has been justified, just like other similar purges before it, as an anti-corruption measure. As the analyst Zhiyang points out, though, there's likely something more behind the story. The senior-most of the purged group, Central Military Commission Vice Chairman He Weidong, was long regarded as a loyalist of Xi Jinping. Xi and He date back decades when both served in the province of Fujian. His rise to the top of the power structure depended almost entirely on Xi's patronage. And yet, he's out. Xi and He, some speculate, likely fell out because of a fundamental breakdown of trust. After all, He's appointment as the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission was part of Xi's program of consolidating control over the Central Military Commission. The reason for that breakdown seems unknown, but it seems possible he began to be seen as a challenger rather than a loyal acolyte. Luck had at least something to do with Xi's final rise to power. The most charismatic challenger, the neo-Maoist Bo Xilai, became trapped in a scandal alleging his wife had murdered a British businessman. Born in July 1949, Bo Xilai was the fourth of 7 children fathered by Bo Yibo, a revolutionary hero exalted as one of the party's 8 founding elders. The younger Bo brimmed with ambition, charisma, and good looks. Throughout his career, he had displayed single-minded ruthlessness. Like Xi, Bo had left a desk job in Beijing to enter grassroots politics. Then, a black Ferrari crashed in Beijing, sparking speculation on who the driver was. The slain driver's father was, in fact, Ling Zhihua, chief of staff to former Premier Hu Jintao and head of the Central Committee General Office, a nerve center that supervises scheduling, documentation, and security for top leaders. Ling ordered a cover-up, worried that revelations about his son's lavish lifestyle could torpedo his chances for a promotion to the Politburo, but attempts to suppress the news were seized on by Ling's rivals and led to his downfall. Xi himself came to power by offering the public a nationalism-powered Make China Great Again populist dream. This was a sharp change in the party's register or tone. Long scarred by the experience of Mao's dysfunctional revolutionary polemic, leaders had tempered their rhetoric and focused on stolid but soulless talk about policies and growth. To regain public affection and claim the party's centrality in people's life, Xi saw a need to inspire people instead. The president moved to place the party unequivocally in charge of policy making and reclaiming responsibilities once delegated to technocrats and specialists. Party committees have come to the fore, setting policies in their own name and siphoning authority from government ministries. Officials openly brandished their party roles, listing them before their professional job titles. Private companies that once played down their party connections now trumpet those ties. PLA commanders the Purges show might be less than uniformly happy at these changes. In 2027, the PLA will celebrate its own 100th anniversary. It is also the year by which Xi expects China's armed forces to have made significant strides in their modernization and war preparedness. Finally, the year is noteworthy because, according to the former CIA director Bill Burns, Xi has directed the PLA to, quote, be ready to conduct a successful invasion of Taiwan. Xi's instructions do not indicate that China will in fact invade Taiwan that year, but as Burns put it, they serve as a, quote, reminder of the seriousness of his focus and his ambition. Yet, since 2023, the scholar Taylor Fravel writes, half the CMC had been dismissed. Even stranger is the fact that all 3 generals who were dismissed in these purges had previously been promoted by Xi Jinping. They were appointed to the Central Military Commission in 2022 after Xi consolidated his hold over the party at the 20th Party Congress. 20 senior PLA officials from all 4 services, the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force, have disappeared from public view or been removed from their posts, and there are rumors that more purges lie ahead in the future. There's some speculation that the PLA's professional officer corps are concerned that Xi could lead them into a catastrophic conflict. He could be weeding out those he believes cannot lead a China genuinely capable of protecting power far behind his peripheries. That we don't know the answer to these questions isn't really surprising. There's always been a deep opacity to decision-making in China that shields its choices not only from the world, but from critical actors within its own system. The dice are clearly rolling though, even if we don't know just where they'll fall. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for joining this episode of The Print Explorer.